The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 10. Treachery and Tournaments. Early summer 1994. When it had all happened several years before, he thought he was dead. It had been drawn out, torturous and painful, just as he always knew it would be. His body and soul writhed in agony. Everything felt raw and ablaze, as though he were on fire. He had no idea what had happened. His only thoughts were of the intensity of the pain and his need to escape from it. He had flown, twisting high in the air, screaming soundlessly into the wind, adrift on a wave of torturous affliction. He had no idea how long or how far he had gone, only that no matter when or where it was, there was only anguish. And then he was no longer flying, but laying exhausted, somewhere far from where he began. He did not know how long he lay there, or even what state of being or non-being he was in. He was, and that seemed to matter for something, though for what he could not be sure. And so he stayed there, hardly sentient, a dirty, ugly thing, like maggots under a rock, or mouldy sludge in a landfill. And then she came. Her beautiful, dry, warm skin was firm to the touch, and he found that he had a sense of touch, which delighted him. Nothing had delighted him in so long. She burrowed beneath him and laid an egg. He caressed it, cared for it as his own, because it was his own. He was more aware now, and he came to realize that he was both inside and outside of the egg. He and the egg became one. He could hear things now, whispers, barely intelligible, then stronger, as he developed his ability to hear again. "Master," she said, and it pleased him. He tried to answer, but found he had no voice. He kept trying. After some time, there was something that could pass for sound, a grunt or a groan, the sound of a creaking door, or a body being dragged across the ground. And then a word. "Home!" A direction. She burrowed beneath him again, and he learned that he was no longer just that dirty, ugly thing, that amorphous collection of misery and maggots. He slunk down into her gratefully, relaxed upon her powerful body, as she began to slither northward, home. Early autumn 1994. Draco's 4th year at Hogwarts was not off to a great start. Granted, he and the rest of the student party weren't being swarmed by Dementors at every turn. Cornelius Fudge had given up on capturing Sirius Black, at Hogwarts at least. And so far, the year hadn't had any of the craziness like the opening of the Chamber of Secrets, or the pitfall of losing the Quidditch Cup like in his 2nd year. But the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor was a lunatic, stomping around on his wooden leg, crazed, roving eyes scaring the shit out of everybody. And they'd been told there would be no Quidditch tournament this year, something that was a great deal of disappointment to nearly everyone. Draco had been hoping for a rematch that might erase a bit of the embarrassment of last year. Add to all of this the more complex and delirious hormones that came with their early teens. When had every girl gotten tits for Merlin's sake? And the year was starting rather squirrely for Draco. But since Halloween night a few weeks ago, something new arrived to occupy the thoughts of the students, as often seemed to happen at Hogwarts on that night. The Triwizard Tournament commenced. This whole tournament nonsense was taking a lot of Hermione's focus, and there was one thing that Draco Malfoy had newly discovered that he liked. It was having the focus and sole attention of his... was she his girlfriend? They hadn't really talked about that. They had kissed again the night after the World Cup behind the Malfoy tent, longer this time, and without the untimely arrival of his elf. But the next morning, Hermione and her parents went directly back to their house from the campgrounds after breakfast. And since being back at school, she had been rather shy and reserved around him. They had held hands under the table in the library as they read, but the handful of nights that he had managed to walk her back to her common room, they had been either accompanied by or had encountered a crowd of Gryffindors, and he could tell that she did not want to be put on the spot. Then the week of Halloween came, and with it the start of the Triwizard Tournament. The shift in focus for practically everyone in the school had started with the arrival of the 2 delegations from Durmstrang and Beauxbaton. Everyone in the great hall, it seemed, had turned to stare as Victor Krum made his way into the entrance hall with the rest of the Durmstrang group. Draco's chest had puffed out when it came time for them to sit down at the welcoming feast. The dark, brooding boy and the others from Durmstrang made their way towards his section of the Slytherin table. It was true, meeting Victor in the minister's box at the World Cup probably made Draco a familiar face, but he could not help but smirk at the fact that the boy had also met Potter and the Weasleys, but did not have any desire to sit with them. The next day, it was time to pick the 3 school champions. No one was especially surprised by the 3 that had been chosen. Fleur Delacour of Beauxbaton was by far the prettiest, most enigmatic girl most of them had ever encountered. And if there was someone from the Durmstrang contingent who looked as though he was made to compete in the Triwizard Tournament, it was Victor Krum. And, of course, Cedric Diggory, Hogwarts prefect, Quidditch captain, and likely head boy next year. Draco had heard plenty of rumors about how he didn't need magic to make girls' knickers vanish. The applause and table discussion for the 3 of them had been effusive. But then Potter's name emerged from the goblet of fire as well, and the entire school erupted into noise for a different reason. There had been an age line in place, or at least that's what Dumbledore had said. Draco, in his heart of hearts, had breathed a sigh of relief when the rule was announced. Whilst his father had wanted him to enter the tournament, he knew that his magical skills would likely not be able to keep up. Potter competing put everyone on edge for different reasons. Draco and many other underage wizards felt slightly cheated at their potential moment of glory. Potter's friend Ron evidently felt overshadowed by the boy who lived. And Hermione, Draco's girlfriend, damn it, even if they hadn't discussed it. She was on edge because she feared for Potter's safety. Logically, Draco supposed it made sense for her to be worried. She was Potter's friend, and the tournament was dangerous, no matter what reassurances Dumbledore gave. Potter, whose examination scores never came close to Draco's, much less Hermione's, certainly lacked the magical skill necessary to compete. He even looked far younger than the others, barely standing at the same height as Fleur, Draco thought snarkily. At least, if it had been him, Draco would have been as tall as the other boys. However, it wasn't Draco competing, a fact for which he was both fervently jealous and immeasurably relieved. But seeing as Potter had been practically abandoned by his closest ally Ron, and thrown somewhat into this tournament, Hermione felt duty-bound to spend her extra time with him. Draco didn't even have to wear his Slytherin jumper to be positively green with envy. As the Ides of November approached, Draco took comfort in knowing that, at least when this task was over, her time would be his again. Potter would succeed or fail, and not need her help any more, and she could focus on Draco once more. Early December 1994. This tournament had not gone anything like Draco assumed it would. He had assumed that Potter would fail miserably, possibly even spectacularly. He had assumed that everyone and everything would return to normal between him and Hermione after the first task. He was wrong. First came the news articles in the Daily Prophet, romantically linking Hermione with Potter. Draco simmered and stewed along with his potions in Snape's dungeon classroom. Then, in the week or so leading up to the first task, Hermione spent her afternoons and evenings squirreled away in the library or holed up in a classroom, along with Potter practicing. Draco's attitude towards his housemates at the breakfast table was as brittle as a piece of overcooked bacon. Then Potter went and won the first task, and Draco began snapping at his friends like an angry dragon. "What the hell is your problem, Draco?" Theo demanded, after he'd had a nearly full pot of ink levelled at his head one evening in the dormitory. "I only asked what everyone thought the second task in the tournament would be." "I don't want to talk about that fucking tournament. It's all I ever hear about," he grumbled. "Does this have anything to do with Granger?" The ever-perceptible Pansy piped up from the floor, where she lay on her back, legs propped against the side of Theo's bed, smoking a lavender and chamomile cigarette. "Fuck off, Pans," he said, covering his face with his pillow. "So, yes," said Blaise, blowing pink smoke rings of his own. "All you have to do is talk with her, mate. You don't think I've tried?" Okay, perhaps he hadn't. It was difficult finding her alone nowadays. Even if Potter weren't glued to her side, Hermione had started hiding deep within the stacks of the library. The 1 or 2 times he'd managed to find her, she'd been sitting cozy with Victor Crumb, of all people, and Draco had snuck away, hoping she hadn't seen him. Victor was a puzzle all his own. Draco knew all about Durmstrang's headmaster's checkered history, and his history of revealing the secrets of the Dark Lord, and his allies to the Ministry, in exchange for his freedom. But who was to say that Karkarov's public denouncement of the dark side was truthful? It was entirely plausible that he was still active in the dark arts, and was bringing Victor Crumb into the fold as well. All of Lucius's old warnings and theories about Hermione lingered in the corner of his mind. Over the summer, Lucius has fixated on the identity of her birth parents. What if Hermione was the child of some dark wizard or witch, and had some sort of predilection for the dark arts because of them? And now, with her seeming to develop a connection with the Bulgarian Durmstrang student, Draco had to wonder if Lucius had been right about Richard as well. What if Richard Granger was trying to expand his network of supporters internationally? He had to know what was going on, and he needed to talk to her.
"Hermione, what mean this word?"
The heavy-browed boy turned the book to face her, and pointed at the word on the page. "Oh, aquatic. It means having to do with water, like an ocean or a lake. Does that make sense?"
"Yes, thank you."
Victor smiled at her warmly, and she gave a closed-mouthed smile in return. It was nice, she supposed, having company in the library again. Draco used to sit with her to study in the evenings, until the last month or so, around the time that the tournament had started. But it was clear that he had become jealous of Harry, a patently ridiculous notion. Harry was a friend, it was true, but nothing more. "This looks cosy," a voice drawled. She looked up in surprise. It was as though her thoughts of him had conjured his presence. Draco had rounded the corner, and was leaning against a bookcase of runes texts. His arms were crossed, sleeves rolled up past the elbow, tie unknotted at his throat, the perfect picture of tension. One eyebrow was raised in a knowing expression. "Oh, Draco, I'm glad to see you," she said nervously, although she wasn't sure why she was nervous. "Are you?" He sneered a bit. Yes," she said falteringly. "I need a quick break. Walk with me." Early in the week, Professor McGonagall had announced the upcoming Yule Ball. Though she felt certain that she would attend with Draco, he had not yet asked her. Granted, they had not had much interaction outside of class lately, but she was hoping to resolve that here and now. If he wasn't going to ask her, she would have to ask him. I wanted to talk to you," she began, smiling shyly at him as they walked side by side between the towering bookcases' aisles. They walked close enough together that their shoulders brushed, but when she looked down to take his hand, she saw that both of his hands were shoved deeply into his pockets.
"Yes, I could tell. What with the fact that you were canoodling with Mr. Bulgarian Quidditch star back there."
She stopped walking abruptly. "What's that supposed to mean?" He turned back to her, sudden and embarrassing tears welling in his eyes. He withdrew one hand from his pocket and swiped at his eyes furiously, shoving his hand back out of sight quickly as he did so.
"It means," he said through clenched teeth, "I thought you were... I thought we were..."
We were! We are!" she corrected herself quickly, but not before his eyes flashed in anger.
"I don't know if you're doing this to advance your father's cause or your own, and I find I don't care."
He turned on his heel and sped away, before she could see the ugly tears on his cheeks. "What is that, Draco?" she called after him, her own throat swelling with sudden emotion. She reached a hand out to him, but he was gone, swallowed up swiftly by the stacks of books. "Draco," she whispered quietly to herself.
"Mini?"
She wiped her eyes quickly, fiercely, on the cuff of her jumper, before turning to face Victor, bright-eyed. "Yes."
"Books Lady Prince say we need to go now. I bring your bag."
But he did not offer the bag for her. Instead, tilting his head to one side.
"Everything okay?"
"No. Yes, sorry. Just tired is all. Thank you, Victor." She reached a hand out for the bag, but he still did not give it to her.
"I carry for you? Walk you to room?"
he asked haltingly, trying to get the words right. "Sure," she smiled wanly. For the entirety of the walk to Gryffindor Tower, they talked about simple things, as they usually did. Schoolwork and Quidditch and Durmstrang and the weather. He had told her before that he approached her initially to help with his English, but it was obvious that he had some interest in her, she thought. It was unrequited, but appreciated by her at that vulnerable moment. She had never been dumped before. She hadn't even been sure she'd had a boyfriend before she lost him. A part of her felt pleased to know that someone, at least, liked her, even if it wasn't the boy she liked back. They were approaching the fat lady now. Victor stopped and turned to her.
"Hermione, I am hoping you go to ball with me?"
Victor blushed furiously. Well, I was hoping... yes, that would be lovely," she said. She tried very hard to keep the disappointment from her voice. It would be lovely, she chided herself. Draco wasn't going to ask her, and would probably say no if she asked him. and Victor was a nice person. He smiled then, awkwardly, the smile of someone who doesn't smile very often. He took her shoulders in his hands and pulled her to him, giving her a slightly scratchy kiss on the cheek. She inhaled suddenly in surprise, taking in the unfamiliar scent of his cologne, startling at the feel of stubble on his chin. "Good night," Victor whispered, and moved her bag from his shoulder to hers. He turned and walked quickly back down the corridor. "Balderdash," Hermione said to the portrait numbly, and climbed inside. Draco watched from behind the statue of Caldwell the Cantankerous as Hermione's court shoes disappeared through the portrait hole. He sucked in a ragged breath and exhaled heavily. He had driven her away with his stupidity. He saw that now. He hoped in his heart of hearts that Hermione didn't like Victor that way. Because no matter what his father said or thought, he truly did not want to think of her as misleading him or acting deviously. Krum, on the other hand, he needed to figure out what Krum's game was, because it was clear the nefarious wizard was trying to get close to Hermione. The only question was, what were his intentions? Draco felt certain they were not honorable. He just wasn't certain if his feelings stemmed from Krum's actions or his own jealousy.
Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Muggle Death Eater by Great 78.